Nick Madrigal. Moment of silence. Everybody pause for it.
All right.
Wow, that was a tough. I mean, that trade's looking tough.
Yeah.
Is it looking tough?
No, not really. Barb, I know, is always upset. It's a nothing trade. It was a nothing trade for nothing.
On it is completely...
The hard part is that the key piece, in my eyes, was the reliever that got hurt.
Well, no, the key piece was Nick Madrigal.
It wasn't in my eyes. It wasn't
what,
for
when you
Herb
made
and
the
White.
trade?
When they made the trade, the Sox guys were all like, "Oh yeah, Codi Heuer might be something." I feel bad. There were no Sox fans that I talked to that were like, "We gave up Madrigal." They'd already decided that Heuer was the better player. Now it turned out neither really had an impact. I don't know. I don't know what the Cubs viewed as the bigger piece. Right, a guy that was the fourth pick in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Madrigal. I mean, he was hitting well with the Sox. I mean, it was like limited sample size, obviously.
It was, but Heuer was looked at as a possible closer.
When they traded for him, Madrigal had torn his hamstring or whatever it was, right?
Yeah. At the time, it was Codi Heuer that I was most looking forward to because I thought I was looking at him as a potential closer, and Madrigal too. I mean, because before he had hurt his hamstring, you looked at the numbers he put up in the minors with the White Sox and some of those really early returns when he got to the major leagues. It did look like a guy who could, maybe not an all-star necessarily, but like if you're looking for a solid second baseman, I thought he really could be that. And so I liked the Madrigal part of it too. But yeah, it was definitely Codi Heuer that I had really high expectations for.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's like Luke said, I mean, it's a trade that didn't work out. I think the tough part is that Craig Kimbrel was having such a good year when they traded him, that he was a top reliever at the deadline, and they didn't. The tough part is obviously they didn't ultimately turn that into anything because Codi Heuer got hurt, Nick Madrigal hasn't stayed healthy, and obviously now he's non-tendered, so he didn't stay healthy, didn't really play very well when he was healthy, except for a month in 2023 maybe. Like he had a really good stretch. And then, but outside of that, I mean, he had, even before 2024, he had like a low back strain, two strains in the same hamstring, I believe, that he tore, and like a left and right groin strain. And then obviously this year, I mean, he was healthy the year, but he just wasn't playing well, and then got optioned and got hit on the hand the first game he was in Iowa. So, I think the tough part comes from the fact that what you got back, your return for Craig Kimbrel didn't turn into really solid major league contributors, and Madrigal just he didn't stay healthy. He wasn't able to be on the field. He played 92 games in 2023 maybe, and that was the most he played for the Cubs in 3 years. He never hit better than 263, I think it was, in any of those years. So I mean, this was like the expectation that he would be non-tendered. Like, to pay him, it was $1.5 million or whatever that would have been. Maybe it was $2 million. It just wasn't like the Cubs probably couldn't justify paying him that because they have now, Ben Cowles on the 40-man, Miles Mastrobuoni's still here, Matt Shaw and James Triantos are right there. It's just there was no room for him on the roster anymore.
For me, it's kind of going with what Ryan's saying. It's like to not get a better return for Craig Kimbrel at the deadline in 21. And if I remember correctly, the trade was made like in the last half hour before the deadline was up. It was almost like Jed was kind of rushed at the end, or maybe he had a better opportunity earlier that day or before the deadline. And it was almost like, well, we got to get something for him now, and I missed the opportunity. That's kind of how it felt. I don't know. I'm not in the front office, so I'm just, spitballing. But for me, that's the biggest thing, is the fact that you didn't get more for what was considered the best reliever at the deadline, I think. I think you can make that argument.
I think so, for sure.
Pointing out, and it's totally true, like his daughter was sick and being treated at Northwestern, so the Cubs did factor that into the decision. But the point is, they thought they were getting a pretty good return. It's not like the Cubs thought, oh, we did this solid for Kimbrel and his family, and we didn't get anything back. They thought they were getting back a closer and potentially a guy that was the piece that was missing, like the type of guy that had been missing from their team. Someone that was going to,
bat the ball skills.
Bat the ball. He wasn't going to strike out as much. He was going to get on base. They saw two guys that they thought were going to be pieces of the future, and it turns out neither. Now, Heuer is an injury problem, but in reality, there are few things that are more valuable than a closer who's pitching well. at the trade deadline. And in this case, with his daughter sick or not, they thought they were getting a good deal and they didn't.
And at the time, it made a lot of sense to swap Kimbrel to get somebody like Codi Heuer in return, because when you're not a playoff team, what's the use of a top tier closer? That's not something that you really need in the short term. So at the time to flip him for somebody that you thought could develop into your closer in a few years, when hopefully you are a playoff contender, in the moment, it made a lot of sense. And it did look like a trade that was good for both sides. I remember at the time thinking, this is going to help the White Sox on a playoff run in their season, and it's going to help the Cubs in the future, which is what they need right now. I really liked the deal at the time.
And it didn't work out. And I think that's like what you're saying, Luke, is, it wasn't like a just thrown together trade last minute to get something in return for Craig Kimbrel. Like, obviously, with the stuff with his daughter, like, influenced where you traded him, right? Yeah. But they didn't go into it saying, Sox, just give us pennies on the dollar. We're doing this for, like, that was part of it. But it was also like you said, they thought they were getting major league contributors for the future. Or like
it looked like a deal, a good deal.
It did at the time for sure. And in hindsight, obviously it didn't work out. But at the time, you're like, this is a pretty good deal for the Cubs, even though Nick Madrigal is recovering from a hamstring tear.
I'm not saying that
Sox fans are mad about it.
I'm not saying that they did the deal with the White Sox because it was the last resort or whatever, or they missed. I guess in some ways the way I worded it, I said that. I wasn't trying to say that. I'm just saying that, like, to me, in the moment, it felt underwhelming. I felt like you could have got more. That's how I felt in the moment. But I also didn't hate the trade. It's kind of how I feel about the trade for Eli Morgan last week. Like, I didn't hate it, but the scouts and the prospect people are telling me that he has a really high upside. So that's what the Guardians are banking on. It's not apples and oranges. It's not black and white. Like, it could be completely different. But to me, I did feel underwhelmed because it was like, this is what you got for what was considered the best reliever on the market. And even if Kimbrel would have gone on and helped the White Sox, I don't know, win more playoff games or something, I probably wouldn't think any different than I do now. Because the Cubs have made the decision. They were selling the entire team that deadline, as much as I don't want to talk about that ever again. But they did get the haul they got back. It did make sense at the time. Outside the fact that it's almost like they thought Madrigal could be what Horner became. And instead the opposite happened, and Horner became what Horner has become, and Madrigal just never lived up, whether it's injuries or not. I mean, he came into last season healthy. And to his credit, I'll give him credit for this. As much as I was very, 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 very frustrated during his entire era with the Cubs, he did learn how to play third base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Luke, you sat here and made jokes about him not being able to throw it past the pitcher's mound for an entire offseason. Okay,
he did.
And he did learn how to play third base.
I gave him credit.
You did. And would I say it was elite? No, but he did what the team asked him to do given the circumstances after they signed Swanson.
He did it better than
I will
Morel
give him
did.
credit for that. But the offense just never showed up. And the offense that White Sox fans said a lot that bothered them and made them question if he could be someone one day it happened with the Cubs. He didn't walk. He walked below 5% of the time, well below 5% of the time. And even though he didn't strike out, it's not like he made great contact out of the time. It was death, taxes, ground balls to second base for Nick Madrigal. All right. So it's like, the offense is really what bothered me the most about Madrigal never working out. I thought he was a good dude. He did whatever the team asked him when it came to defense. He learned how to play a new position, but the offense just was never there. And and I said this all the time whenever we would argue about if he should play more or not, the fact that he hasn't hit over 300 with the Cubs ever, and he doesn't walk at all. There was just not a lot of value there. Just not a lot of value. He was a singles hitter at best.
And once you decided to trade him to the White Sox, and you look back on it in hindsight now, what other players would you have wanted in return? I'm not saying Madrigal was the overall choice. For me, it was Heuer, because I looked at Heuer pitch on the White Sox a couple times and thought, that guy could be a closer. And he started off that way. Even with the Cubs, you looked at him and thought, there's potential there, and then he got hurt. But who else was they weren't going to, was Crochet even there at the time?
He was Didn't he?
He was injured.
He was on Tommy John. Did he have Tommy John?
He played in.
But I'm gonna guess
too,
that that wasn't even an option. They weren't going to give you Crochet for Kimbrel, so they were giving you a guy that had pitched in the majors, Codi Heuer, and looked like he could be a closer someday, and a guy that had hit. You had two major league players for Kimbrel, who in my eyes, I think people overvalued. Is he career-wise, is he a great closer? Yes. Don't forget, he had some horrible moments with the Cubs, and it was like they found lightning in a bottle, traded him off to the White Sox, and got something. The return didn't work out. Injuries and the other player, Madrigal, just never developed into being worthy of the number 4 pick. But the number 4 pick isn't the Cubs' fault. That's the White Sox fault.
And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Mike Tauchman, where that's an example of a time when they had an opportunity, they took it. It didn't necessarily work out, but that's a part of what's going to happen. Like, you kind of have to take that risk sometimes, where I'm going to send you this closer, and I'm hoping what I'm getting in return is something that's going to benefit us in the long term. But yeah, you always have to live with the possibility that it's just not going to. And that's where, we get frustrated when a team we don't feel like is doing enough. But then on the other side of that is when they do make trades that don't quite work out, you have to accept that as a part of it as well, because you can't nail it every time. Nobody does. No team has a perfect track record with trades. And I think sometimes we get too caught up in like the trades that didn't work out and the times that, all that sort of thing. But they've got plenty of moves that have gone the other way as well.
Sure. I would say as far as winning or losing the trade, I just think it's more of like a wash.
Yeah.
We sat here and have made
didn't work out for the White Sox either. Yeah.
We've sat here and made the argument that the Cease-Quintana trade, an Eloy trade, whatever, is a wash now. But you can legitimately say that this one's a wash, because not only did the White Sox use Kimbrel the wrong way, because I remember the whole, like, it was like a talked about thing.
He was their 8th inning.
He was the 8th inning guy.
Yeah.
They let Liam Hendricks be the closer, which, I mean, whatever. But it was like a very long trend of anytime Kimbrel didn't pitch in the 9th inning or in a save situation, he would blow up. And so, and that's what happened. He was not good, because that's how they kind of used him. They won one playoff game with him there. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, to me, it just feels like both teams lost.
Yeah.
We all silly like the mayor.